Today I want to focus on the person of Zechariah. He is one of the focuses of today's gospel, which was regarding the birth of John the Baptist. As we previously read a couple weeks ago, Zechariah, John's father, was a priest serving in the temple. He was offering incense at the altar, and an angel of God came to him and informed him of the good news of the future birth of his son, who would be called John the Baptist. And it is in that event that we find our prototype. Our prototype, you know what a prototype is? A prototype is like the first, or like the ancestor. And it is in Zechariah that we find our ancestor. See, Zechariah is much like any one of us. All of us are in some way Zechariah, and at some point in our life we are Zechariah. In our spiritual walk, we end up being very much like this man. If Zechariah was living in New Jersey, he would be a member of SBGOC. A good standing member, paying his dues. He's probably very active in the church and doing a lot of good things, a lot of great events, helping in so many different ways. But the thing about Zechariah is that sometimes he gets lost in the ritual. He comes to church, he sings the songs, but he doesn't allow the songs to pierce his heart. He doesn't allow himself time to reflect on the prayers, to silently meditate on what God is trying to tell him. Zechariah does all the motions, but he doesn't do it with his heart. Thus, when he hears the message of the angel at the altar, what happens? Zechariah is punished, right? Because of his skepticism, of his questioning of God, of God's message. And then God punishes him with what? The inability to speak. And if you're unable to speak, then what does it allow? It allows you to finally listen. We should all ask ourselves if we are in danger of being a Zechariah. I look out into this congregation and in this altar and myself and see so many of us who are always doing the right thing. You're here today. That automatically makes that you've done the right thing. Just like Zechariah did the right thing by offering incense in the altar, by serving God. And he came and he served. But when the message of the angel came to him, his heart was not ready to receive it. So we have to ask ourselves, are we in danger of being like Zechariah? Are we in danger of not paying attention to our prayers? Are we listening to God? Are we seeking Him in our prayers? And I think something that we often forget. Are we believing the power of our prayer? Not the power that lies in us giving the prayer, but the power in the one that we are asking for help from. I recently read a biography of the famous Christian apologist who recently passed away, Nabil Qureshi. I don't know if you know him. He's a Pakistani Muslim, or he was. He was born and raised in America. And as a born and raised person of the country, he was struggling, understanding his own culture, his Eastern culture, and his Western culture here, living here. And in the mix of it all, this Pakistani Muslim started learning more about Christ. And he converted to Christianity and wrote some really good books. In his book, his biography, Seeking Allah and Finding Jesus, Nabil recounts the story of when he was a teenager. He was at a large conference and desperately trying to find his childhood friends in the crowd of people. So now this is the thing. He was maybe like around 5 or 6 years old when he last saw his friends. And then 10 years, maybe 10 years had passed. Now he's a teenager. And now they're at some big conference, maybe like a family conference. But it was for the Muslim community. He's at this big conference and he's looking for his old childhood friends. The conference is full of people. He might not recognize his friends because it's been 10 years. And not only that, there's so many people that how would he figure it out? So in his desperation, actually, I should also recall that for a lot of people are thinking, wait, why doesn't he just give him a text message or a phone call? This is before cell phones. So he didn't have the cell phone to use. So in his desperation, what did Nabil do? He closed his eyes and prayed to God to show him where to go meet his friends. And even in his biography, Nabil says that he was doing it because he had nothing else that he could think of how to solve this problem. At the same time, he wasn't sure he would get a response. He closed his eyes and prayed. Then when he opened his eyes, he saw a ribbon in the air, almost like an arrow. And it wasn't something that was physically there, but it was something that he knew that he is the only one who could see it. And it was pointing him in the direction to go. So cautiously and kind of disturbed that such a thing happened, Nabil went forward following that ribbon. And finally he came to a point where he met those very friends that he was seeking. This is a simple story, a very simple story. And even yet, when I read it, when I heard this story, I was convicted. I was guilty. You know what I was guilty of? Not having as simple of a faith as Nabil. How many of us would pray in that moment? Or would we rather rely on our own intuitions, our own cunning, our own cleverness? How many of us would have the faith to know that prayer can actually work? I am a Zechariah. Because sometimes I stand here and it's difficult to pay attention. And I know it's difficult for you as well. But what we always need to do is to realize, to snap ourselves awake and realize the power of God. We often think, if only a miracle like Nabil could happen to me. Well, I ask you, if a miracle like Nabil's had happened to you, what would happen to you? Would you change your life? Would you do something different? Would you be something different? Would you act differently? Would you speak differently? If you saw a miracle of God like Nabil did, something simple, how would you change your life? The truth is that God is present in our lives every day and in every way, and God is real. And we can have experiences like Nabil, but we can't expect to see God without seeking Him. Jesus Christ said, "Seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened." We should be careful not to coldly go through our prayers, here in the church and at home. Our prayers need attention. It needs the attention of our hearts. We need to truly seek God. So let us ask ourselves, do we sincerely believe? Or are we simply saying prayers and singing songs? Like Zechariah, if our prayers are not attuned to Christ, maybe we should sit in silence. God made Zechariah silent. And after Zechariah was silent for so many days, when he was forced to listen, when he was forced to seek God, not only in his mouth, when he was forced because his mouth was shut, when he was forced to seek God with his heart. Today's gospel tells us that his mouth then opened as the Holy Spirit filled him, and he spoke the prophecies of God. The one thing that we have to remember over and over again is that our prayer matters. I conclude with a quote. Father Henry Nouwen, one of the great Christian writers in English, he's great books that he's written. He wrote a really good quote that is important for SBGOC today. He said, "Sometimes it seems as if the Christian community is so busy with its projects and its plans that there is neither the time nor the mood to pray. But when prayer is no longer its primary concern, and when its many activities are no longer seen or experienced as prayer itself, the community quickly degenerates into a club with a common cause but no common vocation." Let us continue to make this church, this parish, a church of prayer. That everything that we do is done with prayer. Let us recenter ourselves on prayer, not only prayer of our mouths, but prayer of our hearts. I want to take a moment, a very quick moment right now. Let us spend a moment in silence, recentering ourselves on our hearts, focusing on our heartbeats, focusing on God speaking and working and being present here in this church. Spend this moment with me in silence. May the fire of God come into our hearts and proceed from our mouths and our actions. All glory and honor to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.